Welcome to NFL Nexus. All right, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're running a team and you decide to bet your entire season, heck, maybe your entire franchise's future on one single player. You give him a record-smashing contract, the biggest in NFL history for a guy at his position. And then, almost before the ink is even dry, you find out he needs major surgery. Well, that's not some crazy what-if scenario. That is the unbelievable, high-stakes reality the Indianapolis Colts are living right now. Today, we are going to break down their wild 2026 offseason, which is just a masterclass in calculated risk that can either be genius or could set them back for years. $116 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the contract the Colts handed to wide receiver Alec Pierce. I mean, in a league where guys like Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill are constantly resetting the market, this deal just launched Pierce into a whole other atmosphere. He became the highest-paid free agent receiver in the history of the game. This was supposed to be the move, the one that anchors the whole team. But, as you're about to see, that massive cornerstone, well, it started to look like a giant crack in the foundation almost immediately. Just 42 days. That's it. That is the tiny, shocking window between the champagne popping for Pierce's record deal and the bombshell announcement that he needed ankle surgery. For 6 weeks, the entire city of Indianapolis was on a high. And then, poof. In a little over a month, the team's biggest asset became its biggest liability. This timeline isn't just a couple of dates on the calendar, folks. This is the starting pistol for all the drama, the thing that cast a huge shadow over every single decision the Colts made after. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this thing, we're going to look at it from all sides. First, we'll dig into the $11 million bet itself. Then, we're going to try to figure out what was going on with this gamble on Pierce's health. After that, we'll look at the ripple effect this had on their draft, which, as you'll see, put a bunch of veterans on notice. And finally, we'll put it all together to see what this whole mess means for the Colts' future. All right, let's start with the big one, the $11 million bet. This is the part of the story where we find out how the single largest investment in the entire NFL offseason turned into a massive, blinking red light of a problem for the Indianapolis Colts. One person covering the team put it perfectly. They said, the entire offseason blueprint started bleeding out. And that just nails it. This wasn't just, oh no, a key player got hurt. No. The Colts had built their whole offensive system, their salary cap strategy, their entire plan around Alec Pierce being the guy. So his surgery wasn't a little setback. It was a dagger to the heart of their strategy, putting everything they'd planned completely at risk right from the jump. So now we have to deconstruct this thing. Look, a player getting hurt after signing a big contract, it happens. It's a risk you take in the NFL. But giving a record-breaking, market-shattering deal to a player you already know is injured? That brings up the one question everyone was asking. Why? Why in the world would the Colts knowingly take a risk this big? This right here is the whole puzzle, what we're calling the Pierce paradox. On one side, you have his production, which was just off the charts. The dude was an absolute monster, leading the entire league in yards per catch 2 years in a row, a true deep threat. But on the other side, you got the problem. He did all of that while playing through chronic ankle pain that, according to the team itself, needed constant maintenance. So those amazing stats, they weren't a sign of a healthy player. They were proof of how much pain the guy could play through. This quote from the GM, Chris Ballard, is so telling. And it all comes down to one little word, finally. That one word tells you everything you need to know. Finally, he had a cleanup done. That means this wasn't a surprise. This was the end result of a long, ongoing conversation. It means they'd been debating this for months, talking to doctors, weighing the risks. They knew the ankle was an issue. So the contract wasn't just a bet on his talent. It was a bet that this surgery could make him even better than the guy they just paid all that money for. And listen, this huge bet on Pierce didn't just happen on its own. It was the absolute centerpiece of their entire offseason. They traded away Michael Pittman Jr., who was Mr. Reliable for them, just to clear the money they needed. They totally reshaped their wide receiver room to fit around what Pierce does best. And maybe the biggest piece of all, they slapped the transition tag on their quarterback, Daniel Jones, locking him in for a year at a huge salary, all based on the idea that he'd have his number one guy healthy and ready to go. Every move was connected, and Pierce was the first domino to fall. So now let's do the recovery math, and this is where you can really see the gamble. The best-case scenario, the team's projection is 3 months to recover. Right off the bat, that means he's guaranteed to miss all of the OTAs and most of the off-season program. And for anyone who doesn't follow this stuff super closely, that's where you build chemistry, where the offense gets installed, where a quarterback and receiver get their timing down. And for a guy like Pierce, an explosive athlete coming off ankle surgery, any little delay, any tiny setback at all, could put him at risk of missing training camp. There's just zero room for error here. So, that massive contract for Alec Pierce, that was the earthquake. But now we've got to talk about the aftershocks. Because when you commit that much money to one guy, it forces you to build the rest of your team in a very specific way. You have to get younger, and you have to get cheaper everywhere else. So this is where we get into the draft's ripple effect, and how bringing in all this new cost-controlled talent created some seriously intense competition all over the roster. Right. The Pierce gamble was just the start of it. In a way, it was the move that made all the other moves necessary. The Colts draft wasn't just about grabbing good players, it was about financial survival. It set off this huge domino effect down the depth chart. So the real question becomes, how did this new crop of rookies immediately put a target on the backs of established veterans? To really get the NFL, you have to understand this one concept, roster churn. It's kind of the cold, hard engine that makes the league run. Every single year, a new wave of guys, younger, faster, and, let's be honest, way cheaper, comes in through the draft. And their job is to fight for a spot. And a lot of the time, their job is to take the job of the veteran guy in front of them. It's this constant, brutal process. And for the 2026 Colts, that churn is cranked up to the max. So now let's put some names and faces to this whole idea of roster churn. We're going to get personal here. In this Veterans on the Brink section, we're going to look at 3 specific guys whose jobs with the Indianapolis Colts are now in real trouble, all because of that chain reaction that started with that one giant contract. Our first case study is safety Daniel Scott. And man, Scott's story is a tough one. He was a guy with a lot of promise coming out of college, smart, versatile. But for him, just making the team has turned into this uphill battle, mostly because he's had some of the worst injury luck you can possibly imagine. I mean, here's the brutal truth of it. Daniel Scott has been a member of the Indianapolis Colts for 3 years. But because of this just awful string of season-ending injuries that happened before he could ever get going, he has not played one single snap. Not one. He's basically been a ghost on the injury report. And now he's trying to come back again, but he's walking into a safety room that's been totally rebuilt and is just packed with new players. Yeah, the Colts were not subtle about upgrading the safety spot. They spent a third-round pick on A.J. Halsey from LSU, and in the NFL, a third-rounder isn't some project. You expect that guy to play right away. Then, on top of that, they go out and sign 3 veteran free agents, Johnny A. Thomas, Jonathan Owens, and Asir Adderley. For a guy like Scott, who's never even had a chance to show what he can do on the field, the numbers game is just stacked and possibly high against him. All right, next up is a totally different story. We're talking about defensive end Tyquan Lewis. Unlike Scott, Lewis isn't a guy who's had trouble getting on the field. He's been a reliable part of this team for years, which makes what's happening to him now so telling about the aggressive new way the Colts are doing business. Tyquan Lewis has been with this team for 8 seasons. 8? They drafted him way back in 2018, and he became exactly the kind of player coaches dream of. Versatile, dependable, a hard worker who could play a couple different spots on the line. But even with all that history, he's still an unsigned free agent. The Colts haven't run him back, and his position has just become one of the most crowded spots on the entire roster. And you just have to look at the traffic jam at his position. They already have their star pass rusher in Laiatu Latu and another good starter in Jalen Tumulao. Then they go and draft 2 more young edge guys. And in free agency, they bring in Arden Key and Michael Clemens. I mean, the writing is on the wall. The front office is clearly sending a message that they're moving on with a younger, deeper crew, and it looks like the longtime veteran Lewis is the odd man out. Okay, for our last case study, we're circling all the way back to the wide receiver room where you can still feel the aftershocks from that Alec Pierce deal. This time, we're looking at Anthony Gould, a player whose one specific job, return specialist, is now being directly threatened by a new rookie who can do a whole lot more. Anthony Gould's entire reason for being on an NFL roster has always been his special teams play. He was never really a part of the offense, so his whole value was tied to what he could do as a returner. And here's the problem. Even in that one specific role, he just wasn't making a big impact. His return numbers were kind of meh, and when your only job is to be a game changer on special teams and you're not changing any games, your spot on the team gets really shaky. And that shaky spot pretty much crumbled during the draft. The Colts picked up Deion Burks, a receiver somebody called an absolute lightning bolt. This kid has elite speed and quickness. And here's the kicker. Not only does he have experience returning kicks in college, but he's also a way bigger threat as an actual wide receiver. The Colts don't just see him as a replacement for Gould, they see him as a huge upgrade who can do Gould's job plus a lot more. It basically makes the veterans roster spot obsolete. So, what's the big picture here? What does all this mean for the Colts' future? Well, when you take a step back and look at all these moves together, you realize they're not random. They are all part of one single, incredibly high stakes plan to remake this roster. A clear philosophy built entirely on calculated, franchise changing risk. When you boil it all down, the Colts' entire offseason really comes down to these three massive bets. Bet number one, they gave a historic amount of money to a star player when they already knew his health was a big problem. Bet number two, they're betting that this cleanup surgery isn't just going to get him back to normal, but that it's actually going to make him even better. And bet number three, they are betting big that their new, cheap rookies can step in on day one and be better than the veterans they're pushing out the door. This sentence right here just captures the pressure of this whole situation perfectly. They built a record-setting investment around a man racing a biological clock against a bureaucratic schedule. I mean, think about that. Alec Pierce's ankle is going to heal when it heals. Biology doesn't care about the NFL calendar. But that calendar is concrete. OTAs, training camp, week 1. Those dates don't move. It is a crazy, high-stakes race with absolutely no wiggle room. At the end of the day, the Indianapolis Colts have shoved all their chips into the middle of the table. They've bet on Pierce's health, on their doctors' predictions, and on their scouts' ability to find instant impact players. And now, all they can do is wait. So the question is, will we look back on this 2026 season as a brilliant masterpiece of aggressive risk-taking, or will it just become a cautionary tale of a huge gamble that went completely bust? And that's our look at the Colts' incredibly high-stakes offseason. If you enjoyed this breakdown, do me a favor and subscribe to NFL Nexus for more explainers just like it. And I really want to hear what you think. Head down to the comments and let me know. Was this whole strategy a genius move by a front office playing 4D chess? Or was it just a reckless gamble from the very start? Let me know your thoughts. And hey, one last thing. If you want a great way to support the channel, check out our NFL-themed coloring books. They're actually a really fun way to chill out for fans of any age, perfect for kids, grandkids, even adults. You can find the link for those down in the description or just scan the QR code right here on the screen. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on NFL Nexus.